which reminded me, and I shared this story a couple of years ago, about a moth I saved, glued to my bathroom tiles. And what was so stunning about that, it was such a profound connection, like Kim was talking about. It took me by surprise that the poor little thing was so exhausted after I nudged its wing free and took it outside to let it go. It was so tired it fell asleep on my hand. And I took pictures of it to remind me of the sacredness of all life and Mother flowing through all of us. So I got this little tiny poem that I thought I would share with you today, because part of my personality is that I have retained, gratefully, that when I was a child I was always in awe of nature. Always in awe of nature. And that has never left me, and I'm so very deeply, profoundly grateful for that gift. So this is Walt Whitman, a phrase out of Walt Whitman's poem, Song of Myself, and I thought it was totally appropriate this morning. I think I could turn and live with the animals. They are so placid and self-contained. I stand and look at them long and long. They do not sweat and whine about their condition. They do not lie awake in the dark and weep for their sins. They do not make me sick discussing their duty to God. No one is dissatisfied. No one is demented with the mania of owning things. No one kneels to another, nor to his kind that lived thousands of years ago. No one is respectable or unhappy over the whole earth. So that brings me to sharing with the Mother Within, because I think that as on my journey of healing, and one of the things I wanted to comment about was Sandy's talk last week. She was talking about her evolution of finding wholeness. And wholeness and the word holy come from the same family of words. And basically the bit that I wanted to get on is she's seeking wholeness because our greatest problem is our demented thinking. And it causes us the appearance of separation from God, which is not possible. It is not possible, except that we think it's so. We are such powerful creators that we begin to believe that the stuff we're creating is happening from outside of us. It is not possible. But the hard part is that we've had this conditioning going thousands of years back. And here we are, so profoundly shifted from what life was like, how people thought just a mere 50 years ago. And I've had clients tell me, they said, well, this is the worst time in history to be alive. And I said, oh, really? So what about the Great Depression? What about World War II? What about the Civil War? What about ancient Rome? Which place do you want to go try out? Even the word choice was not really a choice in the recent future. Yesterday I was watching a couple of TED talks on Netflix, and he was saying, 50 years ago, this one inventor was talking about, he was Austrian, he said, 50 years ago, I would have not had any choice in my life. I would have had to marry the woman that my mother picked. I would have had to follow in my father's business. I would have had to go to the school that they suggested, and so on and so forth. Today we have the options, the freedom, even in a lot of the countries that are in turmoil because they're in a global community. We're coalescing into a global community to where they are struggling to hold on to their tradition, and yet they're getting this profound influence from the rest of the world who says it's okay to have your choice. And it's profound for me to think. I was watching this one kid from India I was thinking, what we put into mind, to where they're doing something called a sixth sense. Some of you computer geeks probably have heard of the sixth sense. But it is a contraption that they are building to put around your neck so we don't have to carry iPads, cell phones, cameras. They just walking down the street and they flip their hands like this little computer thing on their neck takes the photograph. They go over to a white wall, they pop their fingers, the photographs show up on the wall, They move things around. They use their hand as numbers for the phone. It calls whoever they want to. They email from just this little gizmo on their neck. I mean, it's just what we put into mind. And it opened me so much yesterday to realize how profound we are and how we're at ground zero at what is possible. I'm watching these kids on TED yesterday, and it's like, my God. You know, here's this young woman, young black woman, who's building parks in the Bronx. Al Gore is sitting in the room, and he says, he came up to her, she proposed shifting the Bronx to make it a better place. And he says, well, we'll get you some grant money. And she says, he misunderstood me. She said, I was making him an offer. And her spirit was so powerful that Al Gore got up a little while later and he says, I want her on my board of directors. You know, it was just, here are these kids who know what is possible in the universe. And they're doing it. And they're gravitating to other people who can make it happen for them. It's just, we just need to shift our thinking just a little. But I've kind of gotten off this topic a little bit. But I wanted to share about the mother within. And I wanted to tell you that I think is one of my greatest contributions to me, therefore to you. Because, and I just want to share that when my mother, in my healing, the situation created an environment with which I'm sure my soul needed the props set up so that I could be here in front of you this morning. But when she was a child, she grew up in the Great Depression. My grandmother left a physically violent alcoholic grandfather, husband, to get away from him. They were starving to death. Malnutrition was so severe that my mother and aunt lost their teeth at 21 years old. Because of that, she was molested by my great uncle when she was a very tiny child. So to just show you that my mother had her own plate of stuff that she was trying to overcome in this lifetime. And so when I was a toddler, the story goes, they teased me about it my whole childhood, much to my dismay, but what it was it was meant to be remembered. And so when I was a toddler, I was about 18 months old, my mother was pregnant with my sister, and she began to have trouble, and they were afraid that she was going to miscarry. So the doctor says, I want you to have complete bed rest, and you don't get to pick up anything, including your 40-pound toddler. So they decided to send me off to my aunt's, that I stayed 3 weeks. Well, my mother told me that, she said, I didn't have the baby in my belly, you were my baby, and I decided to lie and have you back, regardless of the consequences, because I missed you so desperately. She said, so one quick thing before she brings me home is that the trigger was that supposedly at my aunt's, there was a night, she baked a chicken and dinner was on the table. She went out to the car to meet my uncle, escort him in the house, and by the time they got in the kitchen, little Jenny had wolfed down the entire chicken. And I told my mother later, I said, didn't it occur to you that something was wrong with that picture? And because I don't know the 2-year-olds, where did she put it, for one thing? And the second thing is, to me, that would have been a bit alarming, you know? But my mother. So anyway, they bring me home, and she said, you backed up into a corner and you wouldn't come to me. And she said, at first I thought it was because you didn't recognize me. She said, but then I understood it was because you thought I didn't want you anymore. And so what that did was that set me up to think my mother didn't love me through life. And then it was the impetus to help me get into therapy. And so as I was revealing these things, I started looking for the mother within. And the mother within, I like to call my higher self. Now, I told you a few weeks ago that a client of mine had written a devastating letter to her own mother about how she did not live up to her expectations. And the payoff is going to be extreme. I have compassion, but that's her